everyone, and thanks for joining us on another episode of the Rumcast. We are the podcast that talks all things rum with the people who love and shape it. I'm John Gulla, and co-hosting with me, as always, via the magic of the interwebs, is none other than the consummate professional himself of Zavvi.co and American Rum Report fame, Will
Oh my
Hookinga.
God. I'm not prepared for this new intro.
I know. I wanted to give you a rich intro this time. I felt like you deserved it. I know, Will, you're super excited to talk more about our feature interview, actually, in this episode. But first, I wanted to ask you, how are things in Rocky Top, Tennessee, and what have you been pouring into your glass?
Rocky Top, Tennessee? Where do you think I am? I don't live in Knoxville. I live in Nashville. You never catch me singing Rocky Top. I grew up in an Alabama household, so come on, man.
I don't know.
Get your facts straight.
The whole state is Rocky Top, Tennessee to me. I don't know. That's just a fact. No, that's not it.
You got it all wrong.
Yeah, I knew you were from Alabama, so I get that part.
Yeah, get out of here with that Rocky Top stuff. Anyway,
not a John Denver fan, huh?
I'm doing great over here. You know, I just met up with a friend for coffee in person. Later tonight, I'm attending a happy hour event at a local bar called Chopper. That is great. And so, yeah, just getting back in the swing and doing these social things in person is really nice, and I'm enjoying it.
Do people say, get to the choppa when you get there? Like, is that a thing?
Should.
Like,
That's good.
I
haven't heard that yet, but I'm sure other people have come up with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Shout out to Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, you know, in honor of our guest on today's episode, which was Martin Cate, the owner of Smuggler's Cove in San Francisco, which is a bar that I'm sure if you're listening, you've heard of or are familiar with. Perhaps you've been there. And if you haven't been there, maybe you have picked up the book Smuggler's Cove, which is a book that gives many fabulous exotic cocktail recipes, shares a lot of the history of tiki, but also delves into rum in a way that I think makes it kind of a great way to tumble down the rum rabbit hole when you're getting started. It really introduces you to the differences and types of rums and the impact that different production methods have on rum. So we get into all that stuff with Martin in the interview. But before we get started, I know you have a re-rum to share. Yes. I also, I toyed with the idea of doing a re-rum, but I decided instead to kind of do a cocktail edition of a re-rum. So the spirit of the re-rum segment is to revisit a rum that we had, at some point in the distant past, but haven't gone back to in a while, and to go back to it, see if our impressions of it have changed, and reflect on it in a new light, so to speak. So I wanted to do that with one of my favorite cocktails from the book Smuggler's Cove, but I wanted to, this isn't something that I haven't had in a long time. Like, I have these every once in a while, but I wanted to make it in a way that I had not made it before by altering the types of rums that I put into it. So that cocktail is the Smuggler's Cove recipe for Planter's Punch, which is a very traditional cocktail. You'll find lots of different, spins on it and things like that. But the recipe in Smuggler's Cove is, let me pull it up here. So it's an ounce of fresh lime juice, 3/4 an ounce of Demerara syrup, a 1/4 ounce of allspice dram, one of my favorite ingredients, 3 ounces of what Smuggler's Cove deems a blended aged rum, specifically from Jamaica in this recipe, and 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. So we get into this. We talk about the Smuggler's Cove rum categorization system with Martin in the interview. The Smuggler's Cove blended aged rum is defined as, I believe, a rum that is in the 5 to 14 years of age, somewhere in that range, and a blend of pot and column still rum. So again, this one specifically says Jamaica on it, and 3 ounces of it. So typically I would make this with something like Appleton 12 or Appleton 8 year. Those rums always work wonderfully in this, but I didn't have them on hand, and I didn't really have any Jamaican equivalent of that kind of like mid-range pot and column blend rum to use from Jamaica. So I decided to get a little creative and also veer a little away from the 100% Jamaica territory. But I decided to use two rums that I don't typically use in cocktails all that often, although they do make fantastic cocktails. Okay. I decided to use a combination of Hampden 46, Worthy Park Estate Reserve, and I did 3/4 of an ounce each of those. So, I didn't want to commit a full 1.5 of each of those into the rum blend, partly because, I just didn't want to part with that much of each of those bottles that I have, but also because those are 100% pot still rum. So I still wanted to have that balance of having some column still rum in the blend that was going in here. So this is where I steered outside of Jamaica because, again, like I said, I just didn't have something on hand that fit that. Okay. So instead, I pulled in 1.5 ounces of Chairman's Reserve Original from St. Lucia, which has some column still rum in it. So that was kind of like, the foundation. And then you had these two punchy, flavorful, amazing pot still rums from Jamaica in there as well. And spoiler alert, it made a fantastic cocktail. It was one of the best versions of the drink I've ever had. And as I was drinking it, when I have like multiple rums in a cocktail, or really just any kind of ingredients into a cocktail, I think of them in like musical terms, like in how different instruments contribute to a mix or something like
an
that.
Orchestral arrangement.
And I feel like with this one, so the Worthy Park was sort of like the drum and bass in the mix of this one. The Hampton was more like the lead guitar, those kind of like those like citrusy, fruity, sharp notes from that rum that I love so much, really like punching through, while the Worthy Park is kind of like the undertone. And then the Chairman's Reserve, it's there. It's like the rhythm guitar just chugging along in the background. It's like the background vocals just kind of holding everything together, filling in the gaps, rounding things out. It was great. And it reminded me of just one of the things that I think is fun and makes the Smuggler's Cove book a useful tool in learning more about rum, because it's not just about giving you recipes and stuff. It educates you in a lot of ways on how different rums work together, how they're different, and that sort of thing. And I felt like I got to go through that whole experience all in the cocktail. So
I was going to mess with you a little bit and say, like, so you specifically went against Martin Cate's recipes here. But in a way, I kind of admire what you're doing, because you're doing it in such, like you're saying, you took the education you learned from there and applied it in a way you felt makes sense.
I put my own spin on it,
But not just whatever, So I think that is a cool idea and way to think about it. Did the allspice dram still contribute?
Oh,
well
for
there?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's so not every Planter's Punch recipe you'll find, call for allspice dram, but it's a Jamaican ingredient. I mean, not all allspice drams come from Jamaica, but allspice is grown in Jamaica.
Right.
So it's and it's just 1/4 ounce. So you've got 1 ounce of lime juice, you've got 3 ounces of rum in there. So you get just that touch of spice in there. It's great. It's great. So
that's like the little background singer, maybe like in the background of your band, something like that.
Yeah, maybe something like that, or maybe like a nice, maybe like a nice like horns section in the background, something like that.
That would be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I see it.
So anyway, that was my, I revisited that cocktail with a blend of rums that I've never had before, and just a good reminder to, play with your rum combinations when you're making a drink. It's really fun, and I think it's in the spirit, no pun intended, of what was intended with the book, which we get into in the interview. But before we get to that, I know you have a rum that you recently revisited that you wanted to share your thoughts and impressions of. So I don't know what this is, but I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, I was actually inspired by somebody that mentioned it recently that we spoke to, but I'll hold off there so I don't spoil the surprise for you. But so a lot of the times you mentioned, you kind of set up the re-rum segment and the spirit of it already. A lot of times the re-rums that I've done have been about rums that I've revisited and had like a new opinion or an epiphany on, or noted something different about. Not this time.
Okay.
So this time...
So this reaffirmed your existing beliefs?
Yes, exactly. And I'm happy to talk about this rum because I initially sort of immediately fell in love with it upon purchasing it.
Okay.
And then I kind of forgot about it for a while, not because of, a lack of love for it. It just, we have a lot of different rums that we
You're buying
experience.
you're buying lots of rum and tasting a lot of different things. It's easy to get sidetracked.
Right.
There's a lot of good rum out there.
Yeah.
Enough to start a podcast about to talk about it. So
exactly. And so what happened was, when I heard this mentioned recently, talking to somebody, I dug it out of the cabinet again and tried it and fell in love with it all over again. So that was nice. It's kind of like watching an old movie that you loved enough like to buy it on DVD, but then you haven't seen it in forever, and then someone mentioned it, you're like, oh yeah, I need to experience
an old
that
album
again.
you're pulling out that you haven't listened to in a long time.
Exactly.
An old friend.
Yeah. So it's an agricole rum. Aged agricole, specifically, actually. So, and I think I've mentioned before in this program that I've had a hard time with aged agricoles earlier in my rum journey. I think I tried a couple of different ones and was kind of like, don't really know that this is for me.
That's interesting, because my impression usually with people I know who are into rum but are sort of getting into agricole for the first time is it's the unaged that often they kind of struggle with a little bit, because the aged ones, there's still some of the familiarity with the notes that are pulled in from the casks and stuff like that. So that's interesting that it's the opposite for you, it sounds like.
Well, the first ones I tried, the first two were aged agricoles, and both of those they didn't work for me.
Right,
and then I found an unaged agricole then did, and then I got to this aged agricole and decided to jump on that and actually really appreciated it. And in fact, this is an AOC Martinique rum with an H, but I just think this bottle took me by storm. It smacked me around a little bit and made me a believer in great agricole rums, and that those are like a thing that actually exist in the world. So I'm happy about that. All right, so I'm going to give it away here for you. You ready?
All right. Hit me with it.
It's a 1 liter bottle.
Oh, okay.
So do you know what it is?
Is it Nissan?
It is, yes.
Is it the Elevée sous bois?
No, it's none other than Nissan. You're right, but it is
the Reserve.
This is the Reserve.
Okay, I just like to say Elevée sous bois.
That is nice, and I like the French words as well. Reserve spécial, something.
I usually can't say French words, but I feel like I've got Elevée sous bois down.
Yeah.
So,
in America we just call it the Reserve Special.
Yeah, right. So. Yeah. So that one is aged a little bit longer than the Elevée sous bois, if I recall correctly.
Up to 10 years, I think, and it is column still. Cane juice, obviously, rum because it's an agricole. And here was the interesting part when I looked up a little bit more about this time was the process for aging here. It starts in new French oak barrels for about 6 months. Then it gets moved into ex-bourbon and ex-whiskey barrels for like 3 to 6 years, or maybe a little bit more, before it then moves back into ex-cognac barrels with newly charred heads on them.
Right. Yeah. I knew that there were like a mix of cask types and stuff like that went into it, but I couldn't remember specifically what they are. So yeah, that's an interesting combo.
It is, and I really do feel like it gives it a nice complexity. I really like the color on it. By the way, it's like a dark amber or like a burnt sienna. I don't know if you had crayon boxes when you were a kid.
I remember burnt sienna. Come on, that Purple Mountain Majesty. Come on, I was a Crayola kid.
Excellent.
So I know we've had our disagreements over bottle and label design.
Yes.
Over the history of this podcast. We've had some battles on that front. Can we agree that the Nissan bottles are fantastic and the labels?
We can almost agree.
Oh, come on. What do you have against them? They're great.
All right.
They're unique. The labels are cool. What is the problem here?
Okay. Well, so I do think the bottles are very distinct in their shape and design, and I like that. And I do like the label and the way it looks for the most part. It's a little stark, but I can roll with it. But here's the thing. It still has a screw cap on it.
Oh my God, the screw cap! Get off your cap, high horse, man! Get away from the corks. There's nothing inherently classy about a cork over a screw cap. Okay,
no. I missed
the utility. The utility. You need the sound effects.
Yep.
Come on.
I'll say this. Look, it's nicer, this one, because it's got like the stamp of the actual logo on the top of it. So rather than just being like plain, It's a little nicer, and so I'll give it a little bit of props. But it doesn't sit with the rest of the bottle is beautiful and looks so nice, and then you've got this thin. You can squeeze it with 2 fingers and it'll bend. The screw cap. So like I don't know. It just doesn't give me the impression that I want.
I thought this was going to be a moment for us to come together and really celebrate this. You started out, really celebrating what a wonderful product this is, and I was like, you know what? I don't know how anyone could think this bottle isn't cool if they have taste. And I thought you were a man of taste, but I just, unfortunately, this is where we're at.
No, I think this is us. Yeah, well, this is us. This is us. But if let's put it this way. If that's the worst thing about this bottle, this is a friggin' amazing bottle. And I mean that in the general sense, not just the bottle design, but like the rum and everything. If that's the criticism, we're in a good place.
Sure.
Okay, so let's keep that there. I did have one other slight criticism of it, which is for this product, it's 42% ABV. Mm-hmm. So it's nice. It's it's bumped up a tiny bit from the standard 40, but it still feels a teensy bit light, and I would just really like to see how that would sip at 44, 45, 46. Just a
get
little
it up
bit
to
more.
a nice round 90 proof.
Yeah. So we'll just agree to disagree on screw caps and agree to the rest of it that we really enjoy.
I can agree with you on the proof.
Yeah.
Maybe we can meet up in Martinique someday and try it right out of the barrel or something like that together.
I think so. I this rum made me a believer in agricoles, which, by the way, in French, do you know what the word is for believer?
No, I don't.
It's crayon.
No, it's not.
Je suis crayon. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I think
it's spelled the same way.
It's spelled differently. Croyant. And I'm not a scholar in French.
Okay.
But it definitely sounds like crayon. So just to bring that full circle there, there you go.
It's crayon. Somehow I don't think the French pronunciation sounds the same as crayon.
But it's
close enough that I like that you worked it in there and brought us full circle. That was nicely done.
I'm a lover of words, Will.
Yeah. On that note, yes, we have an interview with Martin Cate. I set it up a little earlier, but we talk. We get up to speed a little on where things are with Smuggler's Cove, which the interview was fortuitously timed in that the grand reopening is coming up June 15th. We're recording this intro on June 9th, so I think the episode will be out before the reopening. That's really cool. We get into Martin's own journey into rum, how that's evolved over the years. We talk about the rum categorization system in Smugglers and a whole bunch of other stuff. So this is a very rum focused interview. I think that's one of the unique things about Smuggler's Cove is rum is really front and center for them in the way they do things, and rum education is a big part of it. So talk a lot about that stuff, and it was a fun interview, and I think that you will enjoy it. So stay tuned.
If you're listening to our show right now, there are 6 words about rum that are likely to catch your eye: single barrel, cask strength, and no additives. Those 6 words are the whole premise of the single cask rum releases from Holmes Cay, the sponsor for this episode of the Rumcast. Holmes Cay seeks out the world's best rums and releases them unadulterated and at cask strength in limited editions. Check out their website at homescay.com to learn more about their new 2021 releases, distilled at places like Foursquare in Barbados, Demerara Distillers in Guyana, Travelers Liquors in Belize, and Clarendon Distillery in Jamaica. Also, you'll definitely want to stay tuned for more exciting 2021 releases coming up soon. You can find out more at Holmes Cay, that's HOLMESCAY.com. Now back to the show.
All right, we are here with Martin Cate, the owner of Smuggler's Cove in San Francisco, author of a book by the same name that we've mentioned plenty of times and recommended heartily on this podcast over the past year plus. And I know that a lot of our listeners are familiar with it, Martin. We hear from them all the time about it. A lot to get to in the interview about rum specifically, but I was just, kind of looking back through old articles, looking at the Smuggler's Cove website, getting ready for the interview, and I noticed that across the top there's a big banner right now saying reopening June 15th,
Yes.
which is really exciting, and I feel like something we should probably acknowledge and talk about real quickly. I know obviously it's been a crazy, difficult, hard past few months. So, I don't want to force you to relive all the dire circumstances of all that. But what's it kind of been like, being so close to reopening now? And what have you been doing over the past few, weeks, days, kind of getting prepped to be somewhat back in the swing of things?
Well, gosh, yeah, it's been very emotional. It's been a really it's been a hard. Well, today is day 443. Not that I'm.
Do you really have do you have tally marks somewhere?
No,
Yeah.
I looked it up recently, but it is kind of jaw dropping to think about.
That is, wow.
I think we knew. I mean, if I had been told on March 17th of last year that we'd be down for 400 plus days, I would have just thrown in the towel. I would not have even imagined the survival. But the survival, and we'll talk about these people as we go on here today, I'm sure. But the survival has been very much a huge part of with the tremendous amount of thanks to the people, to our regulars who've been kind enough to both stay with us in terms of to-go cocktails, drinking rum, buying bottles, donating to our staff's fund. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to keep our entire staff and keep them on 100% fully paid healthcare during the entire lockdown.
Wow.
So that's that. I mean, the last few weeks have been a kind of a flurry of repair work and deferred maintenance and things like that. Lots of, and I still don't have a working pond, but I will someday. But so it's just been a lot of that. We're having a couple of private soft openings for some of our club members right now, and just trying to get everyone's joints loosened again and everyone kind of back into the swing of things. So yeah, it's been hard. It's been really emotional. And it's been, I mean, I've fortunately, again, had the good support of those folks and the support of other bar owners in San Francisco in particular in the community. But of course, I'm not alone at Smugglers either. I've got my interest in other bars around the country, and we've all gone through various slices of hell in different forms.
Yeah.
They're all unique experiences. So, but yeah, it's I cannot wait. I'm so pleased, and just having a handful of people in the other night was really very moving.
Awesome. Yeah, that's obviously a huge deal for Smugglers and many other, as you mentioned, bars that are reopening now across the country. We're really happy that things are getting back to some semblance of normalcy and things are going the right direction in the country overall with COVID. To take us out a little bit of that, and I think probably Smuggler's Cove needs no introduction for anyone on this listening to this podcast because it's been such a success for, over a decade now, I think. And you mentioned you're also part owner in other incredibly successful bars around the United States. So I wanted to kind of start by asking, what are some of the things in your mind that contribute to the success of a Martin Cate owned bar or partly owned bar? Are there any non-negotiables for you in terms of how they operate or tenants that you keep or anything like that?
No, that's a good question. I never wanted to duplicate or franchise Smugglers. I wanted every experience to be unique. I wanted every space to have its own aesthetic, design, backstory, atmosphere. Some places are very are sort of crowded and busy. Some places are a little more sedate and neighborhood. One of the unifying elements is an immersive experience. We always focus on having a space that takes you out of your current environment, your current neighborhood, into a space that is filled with art and design. And I'd say that's very much something that I celebrate because I really like creating spaces that are unique and are experiential for guests because, here we are in year, who knows exactly, 20 plus of sort of the cocktail renaissance. Mm-hmm. And there's been so much coverage and there's so much good information to be found in various books about spirits, about cocktails and things like that, that there's every reason, and certainly over the last year, there was the only reason, but there was every reason to make a drink at home. And our mission is, what can we offer you that's different? What kind of shared space, fun experience, and just, something different that isn't the four white walls of your house, and into something else. And most importantly of all is community. I mean, all of my projects have some kind of club or organization for drinkers, for frequent drinker clubs, rum clubs, of course. And that has been one of the most important and meaningful things that we've done, because as one of my club members said to me once, she came up and she said, it's very rare that adults in the modern 21st century America can find community. This is
so true. Yeah.
There's a terrific book that came out several years ago called Bowling Alone, about sort of the decline of community participation in America. And it goes back to that idea of the third place, that there has to be a space between that's not home and does not work and does not bear the responsibilities of either. Mm-hmm. That it's a space that is where you can be, where you can form friendships, make bonds. And so for us, these bars are a real big part of that. And we accent that by having these clubs and organizations that help people to bond. The most meaningful thing to me is when I see texts or Facebook posts, for example, of several of my club members just out to dinner together, 6 of them at a restaurant table or something like that. And I just think those 6 people met, they bonded through rum, they bonded through a shared experience, and now they're just friends. And now they're just going out. It's not connected to the club anymore. Mm-hmm. It's formed something new. That is, to me, I feel like the most valuable thing we do is create that environment.
I love that you mentioned that, because one of the things that both John and I have both noticed in our own lives over the past year, especially, I know, John, you and Martin connected because Martin came and gave a presentation for the Florida Rum Society, which we've talked about a lot on the podcast. And we've been trying to make more of an effort to help people connect to these local rum societies wherever they are in the world. We put up a page on the website trying to list them so people can find them easily, because we hear from people who listen all the time saying I wish there was something like that in my community. And we've actually seen people making a more active effort to start these. And I think the pandemic had some of an effect on that, of people wanting to connect online over shared interests and things like that. But I'm in Nashville, and I've seen it here with a couple of people in the city. Started up an organization called Friends of Rum Tennessee, and it started during the pandemic, and it was just a few of us on Zoom calls, and now we've been able to meet up at a local bar and make those connections. We're all people who lived in the area and never knew each other, and we all liked rum, and that kind of brought us together. So yeah, I think that's a really cool and special thing to remind us that it's great when these shared interests bring us together, but it's even cooler when you find out that people from all different walks of life coming together and forming real relationships that grow beyond the shared interest is always really cool. I want to get a little bit into, I've talked before on the podcast about how the book Smuggler's Cove was a really big part of my own journey into rum and getting me to delve deeper into rum itself. I got the book to learn how to make interesting cocktails, and it really opened my eyes to the interesting world of rum. And you kind of talk about that in the book, of this sort of symbiotic relationship that rum and tiki have. And then there's kind of a quote that in there about the guiding principle of the bar Smuggler's Cove, which you wrote is to use the aesthetic of Polynesian pop and the grandeur of the exotic cocktail to provide a framework for the further discovery of rum. So I think it's interesting and uncommon how rum is the end point. It's what everything is about the experience is kind of, or I don't want to say everything about the experience is pointing to rum, but that's a very conscious effort, the discovery of rum. And I'm interested to hear from your perspective, how does Smuggler's Cove, the bar, do that in a way that other bars, might not, or how does it approach it differently?
Well, a few things. So the history of, I'll just talk about Smugglers first, but we can talk about kind of where this came from. I guess I should add that. I mean, from the 40s through the 60s, the tiki bar in America obviously was extremely popular, but was also really starting with Dawn in 33, it was the first bars in America that were proponents of the spirit that really went out of their way to say, hey, this is a spirit that was largely forgotten about as America in the 19th century became much more of a whiskey drinking country and moved away from rum. Rum was considered more quote unquote coarse or things like that. It had a bad reputation, or just had a reputation as being British, which wasn't very cool after 1776 or so. And so
can't remember why.
Yeah, I can't remember why either. So there was a sense that Don was a real proponent of the spirit, having, of course, had his travels throughout the Caribbean. But it was an effort to try to elevate and point it out at a time when both it met aesthetically with the notion of designing a tropical space, but it also had the advantage of being affordable immediately after Prohibition, and all kinds of magnificent rums, long aged things that had been denied their largest market, were just getting older and more lovely as they sat in Jamaica and Barbados and places, and they finally came into the States and at good pricing. And so this was a great opportunity to not just work with these wonderful spirits, but just to pour them. I mean, you know, Don from day one had a rum menu that offered neat pours, extolled their praises. He had country to country guides about rum, and then was followed by Vic doing the same thing, and Steve, and a lot of the other proprietors. So even places that were, you know, game of telephone, third level knockoff bars in the middle of nowhere would love to have lots of flowery prose about the wonders of rum and the joys of rum. And when you look back, the selection wasn't quite as good as we imagined. Some of it was from Don's own cellars and personal shopping and things like that. But distributor catalogs and things indicate a good and interesting selection, but not as vast as what we have today. So, I mean, we look back on those era, a lot of great rums that were lost to us by the 70s and 80s. But most of them are back and tenfold at this point, which is so it's a really great time now to be a rum lover. I reflect on those places because they were the places that were doing the heavy lifting of trying to reintroduce this category to the American drinker, to the spirit category, because it had fallen away. And I'm saddened to reflect on the idea that, and it's Vic spoke about this when he wrote his last book. He really said that he sort of had a lot of regret. He said, I really feel like I've spent over 40 years trying to make this spirit take off, really trying to get people to enjoy it, particularly as an after dinner spirit to enjoy by itself, to find a sophisticated, nice, long aged spirit. And he felt in some ways, I don't want to say quite that he'd failed, but he was definitely disappointed that it never took off the way he thought it would. He said he still served lots and lots of cognac and scotch to guests after dinner. And despite his vast selection and great offerings, he felt that he really couldn't shake people of these sort of traditional spirits that they were used to, or had a built-in reputation, for whatever it's worth, of being a more sophisticated spirit. So I approached it in some ways from that angle again. I thought, let's create a space that's fun and engaging and seems and I don't want to say it lures you into a sense of comfort to get into rum, but we started from day one saying we're going to have I knew from launch in 2009 that I was going to have a rum club, because I had already, in my first bar back in 2006, I had started a rum club. It had a lot of uptake, a lot of popularity, and I wanted to do it again, only this time I wanted to make it bigger, more educational, with more information, has a self-guided tour component and things to it.
Programmatic. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And it's sort of you get a punch card, you get 20 different chapters to study. Your homework for each chapter is rum, which is a good problem to have.
There's levels to go through.
Yeah. And so you kind of just read, okay, here's a description about, the differences between pot and coffee column stills or something to that effect. So people go through this education, this sort of self-guided education, and they come in, they come in after these 20 chapters of lessons now ready to go wider and explore more with a bit of more framework, a bit more understanding of what they're drinking and what this has done. My initial thought was, in truth, I had also worked retail at a big liquor store and had known that nobody on the staff and none of the guests knew anything about rum. Mm-hmm. Rum was still, this is back in 2004-ish, I guess. There was still only a handful of premium brands. There was still a sense that if it was more than $11.95, that it was crazy. Who would ever buy that? There was a sense that the largest rum company in America had sort of, in some ways, artificially deflated prices or kept value down on the real value of this spirit. And I remember lots of brands coming in with, hey, this is a new super luxury brand. It's $100 a bottle, and just falling, just never surviving. Far too soon. Not today's world where $100 rum, no problem.
Right.
And that's great. I mean, that is great news. Because
and so many more in between those levels.
Absolutely.
As well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thought if I can make through this rum club, if I can make a bunch of informed consumers, if I can make just a bunch of people who will walk confidently into the liquor store, knowing their own personal tastes and preferences from having gone on this journey with us, that they'll walk in and say, yes, I like that stuff. I don't like that stuff. I'm going to buy a bottle of that and feel great about the drinks I'm making tonight or whatever, or the gift I'm giving to a friend. And I can talk about it and I can say, actually, this is 100% tropically aged, it's pot and column blended, So I wanted to create that community, and I feel like I have, and it's been great. So we wanted to create a fun space, but then it's for a lot of our regulars now. They come in and they're just there for the rum. Some of them, might take a little breather with a daiquiri in between.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing at all. Especially after straight rum number, I've had 6 DOKs in a row, and my head feels sort of weird. I think I could use a beverage.
Talking about that, going from interested in drinks, progressing into being interested in rum, what was the moment for you? Because my recollections from things I've read, interviews and things like that, it seemed like you were initially drawn to tiki for the atmosphere, the culture, the vibe. It was more about the drinks. Like when did the real awareness of rum come into the picture? And I know you've also spoken about when you got into it, like great drinks were not the standard at most of the bars you were going to back then. There were exceptions to that, but rum wasn't perhaps as much on a pedestal at some of those places as it is at places like Smugglers now. Do you remember kind of like when it clicked for you? It was like, wait, like there's something about this spirit too that is like captivating for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of a 2-pronged attack, right? Because the first one was as I start to meet other people with this like-minded interest in this vast multidisciplinary art form, we were making drinks, but you couldn't find them anywhere. If you found them somewhere, they were terrible. They were made with sour mix. They were bottom shelf rums you'd never even heard of. There's a lot of these rums that only exist for low-cost distributions to dive bars that exist on shelves. Yeah. And so it was that kind of stuff. I remember vividly going into one bar and walking up to order a drink for a friend and say, can I have a Mai Tai and a zombie, please? It was on their menu. I wasn't, making it up. They had, I never walk into a dive bar and demand a zombie. It's just still, but they were trying to do a tropical drink menu. And I said, can I get a Mai Tai and a zombie? He said, it doesn't matter. It's the same drink. And, wow. I think your heart like kind of stings and you think, oh God, what are we going to do? And so I was playing around starting in the late 90s at home, making drinks. And then it was really this notion of having to buy all these rums to make these drinks, thanks to Don and his fancy rum mixing. So we had to, I'd be out buying Jamaicans and interesting. There were a lot of weird things on the shelves back then that you can't really see anymore, but some unusual rums from like molasses rums out of Martinique, strange expressions and things like that. I'd be getting agricoles or molasses rums from Martinique and Jamaican, Barbados, blah, blah, blah. So the point being, I'd make the drink. I'd love the drink. I'd say, this is terrific. Gosh, you really can enjoy the fresh juice and the blend of rums. But why in the world did I just have to spend all this money? come back from the liquor store, with a little pretty light in the wallet and a little woozy in the head, like, oh my God, what am I, I had
We've all had that experience.
Oh yeah, it's a little terrifying. And so then it's as simple as this. I just taste them by themselves.
Yeah.
And then say, wait a minute, these three, I wouldn't even peg these three spirits as being in the same category.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How can it be this different and still say one 3-letter word on the front of the label? It doesn't make any sense. And that's what opened your eyes to understanding the journey rum took across the Caribbean and across the world, the evolution in distillation techniques, the fermentation techniques, all of the stuff that opens up that everybody knows about now. But it was just kind of this is a really eye-opening moment. And this is where I started visiting distilleries and started trying to understand more. And it's really, I just never, and to this day, never stopped being amazed at the diversity of the category. It just keeps going on and surprising me. And at this point in the United States, we are obviously all a little jealous of the fun variety of independent bottlers that exist all over Europe. It's getting better over here, fortunately, but still overall, the amount of things between either long-established existing producers, either first-time bottling under their own distillery names, or just producers who never came to the United States. That plus all the American craft rums, hundreds and hundreds of those. What a time to be a rummy! It is a great time and exciting. And so this is what keeps my club members excited, me excited, and so we keep drawing in new people who, rum at the end of the day, in most cases, previously mentioned DOK notwithstanding, rum in most cases is a terrifically approachable spirit. It's very friendly. It's very quaffable. It's got a wonderful kinds of familiar notes and characteristics that people enjoy. I'm not trying to start a club based entirely on Islay malts. I'm basically trying to say this is there's one out here for you. I promise you're going to find something you love. Yeah. And you're going to find something that, if I bring someone in from a different category, I only drink tequila. Oh, okay, great. I bet you're going to love some of the vegetal notes of this agricole. Try this. Oh, I only drink bourbon. Well, I'm going to put you in some lighter bodied Barbados. It's nice, got a beautiful charred cast, et cetera, stuff your listeners know. But this, and I've watched as our, 400 members of our club, 400 plus members at Smuggler's Cove's club have started, I know who my agricole junkies are. Yeah. I know who my high ester pot folks are. I know who not as many, but my sweeties, my guys who love and gals who love sweeter rums and things.
They sound like rival gangs.
Yes, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like reading a rum forum. No. It's fun because not only do I get to discover how their tastes grow, and I do watch them not just go to certain favorites, but also evolve.
Yeah.
Things that they came in maybe loving. And then, there are rums where I'll talk to a guest who they'll say to me, when I came in here for the first time 6 years ago, my favorite rum was X, and I have not touched that stuff in 6 years. I haven't had another drop of it. And I'm just amazed. And maybe I'll go back and try it one more time. And then I do and go like, well, I used to like this. This is weird. This isn't. And so it's kind of fun watching the evolution. And it also gives me a wonderful focus group. Basically, I've got a terrific focus group of my own where I get such great feedback from them. Hey, folks, I'm introducing this new one this week. Try it out. And a bunch of people say, "Blech, why'd you bring that in?" Or a bunch of people say, "Oh, this is great. Why are we waiting for it?" So it informs my decisions about what to carry as well. So and I think it's great. So my curation evolves as well in the same, from their feedback too.
Well, Martin, I think first of all, quaffable is my new favorite word. So thank you for that. And you talked a lot about education in all of that. And so I have to imagine that then Smuggler's Cove, the book, probably was the next evolution of thinking about spreading that rum education to people along with the tiki education as well. And funny enough, when I looked it up, at least according to Amazon, the book debuted 5 years ago, almost to the day.
That's right. Yeah, in June. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Happy early birthday, Smuggler's Cove, the book.
Hey, everybody, tipple. Well, unless you're driving, no drinking if you're driving, but and listening to. But I think it's safe to say, obviously, now that has been well received amongst both tiki and rum communities. When in that timeline, as you were kind of talking us through, when did you decide, okay, I've got to write this book? And was it exactly for those reasons, or were there other reasons as well?
The book came about mostly at the aggressive harassment of my agent, who now my agent, but it's a. My agent just kind of cold called one day at the bar, and he said, "I think there's a real space in cocktail books." He's represented a lot of other cocktail book authors in different categories. He said, "I really think there's a space for this." And I said, I don't know. I'm pretty busy. I don't really know if I have time for this. It seems like a hell of a undertaking." And he kind of pushed me on it, and it was really just sitting down and giving it some more thought that I had seen a handful of sort of smaller books written, either, these kind of ones that are just cheapy knockoffs that are not necessarily, they're sort of, I don't know, like sort of a contractual fulfillment book of something. I don't know.
Right.
They're these things that show up and they end up on remainder shelves, but they were sort of, tiki fun time happy drink book or something, or and you use all kinds of this book uses both kinds of rum, gold and dark,
light and dark.
So there was a couple of books like that where I'd see them coming out and I'd say, God, this is so bad. I feel like there's a sense that we've made so much progress, but maybe there's a long way to go still. Because obviously there were already great books out there, particularly by Jeff and things like that. Mm-hmm. There were other great, it wasn't that this was the first or anything, but there was just a lot of crap coming out too. And so it was a sense that, I think we actually, I do think we have something to bring to the table. And I think it was a combination of bringing something that was more in depth about rum, more in depth about the history of these bars, more in depth about, being able to write from an operational standpoint, having done it at that point for over 5 years, that we had something to get back, talk about our clubs, talk about this. And so we decided to push forward. I had the good fortune of my better half, Rebecca, being unceremoniously laid off before Christmas of that year. And I said, "Hey, you want to write a book?" And I've since ruined her life. And but we were able to work on it together, and it was much needed. And her background, her research background, was immeasurably important in getting it together. So it has sort of my color and my 50-cent words and things like that. But it has her solid skeletal structure under it. So that's the kind of, it was a good partnership, needless to say. But it was also a tremendous amount of work. We flew all over the United States. We photographed places all over the U.S., events, bars.
That sounds terrible. Oh man,
I know, right? Well, it's fun out of the event when you're just shooting.
Yeah,
drinks.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But we did have, and we're very proud of it, and we wanted to do something that was tried to offer a bigger thing. We definitely pushed our publisher to say, I don't want to do a coffee table book with just pretty pictures. I don't want I don't want it to just be recipes. I want to give it some context. I want to give it some depth to try to get people to appreciate not the spirit, the atmosphere, all the things that come together to create a great space, but also, and to really celebrate the spirit.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we did the categorization system for the book, which was, again, contrary to what you may have read online, was never an attempt to define it for the world. It was an attempt to define it for the home user of our book. It is, in essence, just a slightly more Baroque version of the Gargano classification.
Sure.
And it's the idea being that you would use it to help determine how you built your home bar. and how you could label your bottles at home for quick reference, for ease of access and things like that. And to get you to think about things like when we define a certain category as a molasses-based blended lightly aged rum, that category in and of itself has a tremendous amount of variety in it. And so I want wanted people to take that category and then go and shop all the variability within that category, find their favorite within that category, or favorites, plural, and then use that as part of their sort of home arsenal. So it was not an attempt to say that it's saying this is, roundly to say that these rums are made of pot and column still, they are lightly aged, et cetera. That is correct. Could we dial down more on that? Sure. I mean, this category could have gotten broken out a lot more, but we wanted it to be the place where you started as the home user to find your path and your favorites and things like that. Because I love the idea that everybody has a home bar now with, this is my favorite number 4, this is my favorite,
right.
Things like that, which means that unique puzzle they've put together when they make this drink, if they make a 3 dots and a dash, it tastes unique to their home bar. So that's that sense that you've put the puzzle together in a way that makes it taste special at your house. It doesn't taste this way at the person next door's house who's doing the same thing. As though I'm imagining everybody has these home bars next door to each other, but it does have this. I think it gives you a true taste, right? That's based on your preferences, and that's, people write me all the time. Well, what would you pick? I'd say I would pick the one that you think tastes good because it's the one that you're drinking and you're pouring for your friends. It's okay to, it's if you think that the best Mai Tai in the world is 100% DOK rum because that's what you want. I know I want to keep going back to it. I don't know because it's just so extreme, but
top of mind right now. Yeah.
Yeah. But if that's what you think, then by God, you're drinking it, drink it. I mean, this is kind of it's okay. You can have this. I mean, I'm telling you what I think it is good. I'm telling you where I think it comes from historically, but I'm also saying it's okay to do what you want.
Right.
It's your body.
And I think the interesting thing with categorizations is I've never seen a categorization system for rum that doesn't have some degree of trade-offs or like further room for interpretation. Like even if you tell someone when you make this cocktail use an aged Jamaican rum, like if the cocktail's going to be dramatically different if they use Appleton 8 in one version and Smith and Cross in another, it's going to be a completely different drink. So I'm glad you brought up the categorization system. Do you remember much about the process of developing that? Because to me, you talk about all the, like how much work it sounded to write the book, and even just doing a categorization system like that seems so daunting to me. Like how much a percentage of the time of the book was spent just on figuring out that stuff?
Well, I think the idea was it was based a lot in conversations with Luca, with people, and Richard, and people like that. We talked quite a bit, and we talked about how, it was at that time, it was a big push on both of their parts to really say that production was the most critical factor, and how it was distillation methodology and yeast and fermentation, yeast choices, fermentation choices, because in part, at least in the world of molasses-based rums, because in part that since molasses was for so many islands a commodity that was blended, brokered, traded from other places, et cetera, that the real craft for molasses-based rums was in the skill of the distiller, the skill of the blender. That was really, making those decisions about what kind of equipment we're using, how we're using the equipment, how we're fermenting, how long we're fermenting, all of these variables, which to me are more important than the raw material. And so that was, so we wanted to echo that. But what we found with that methodology was that it didn't take into account, there's several things it didn't take into account, but the only one that we thought was kind of important was the age issue, because they didn't really account for age. And I really thought the reason I want to take into account age is that it is in deference to the manufacturer, because the manufacturer is putting out a product that they want you to use in a drink, and they're also putting out a product that they want you to use in by itself, that you want,
Right.
you want to enjoy by itself. So, I mean, just to think of an example off the top of my head, I mean, you would categorize Eldorado 5 and Eldorado 21 as the same classification.
Right.
That's not necessarily useful when you're using some for drinks and some to enjoy. Of course, you can put 21 in a drink if you're feeling flush, Mr. Rockefeller, but that's fine. But we thought we'd make the age demarcation just because that those higher aged ones are the ones where the manufacturer themselves is saying this is something to enjoy neat. So we added that. Now we could add 100 other things. We could add like esters, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't, in the end, decide to make, after a lot of discussion back and forth, we didn't decide to break out coffee, traditional coffee versus multi-column, although I think it's really important. And we kind of hope that people will do that research on their own or discover the distinction between those two. I mean, obviously, part of the reason we did that was because strictly 2-column coffee still production, like English Harbor, for example, is sort of vanishingly rare these days, which is a shame. And so we wanted to, I would love to point out more of that, but I didn't have a lot of examples at the time. So it's still, you're right to say that there's no classification system where you can't say, okay, that's good. I would point that it has X, Y, or Z problem. And even every classification system I've seen subsequent to mine, I thought, okay, that's got some good, that makes some very good points, but I feel like it's missing something here. Right. So yeah, you're right to say that there's nothing flawless. I think maybe the best way to think of it is, taken as a whole, all of them in some way work together towards just better consumer information and better understanding of the spirit. I mean, yes, they'll take different paths towards it, and that's fine. But the net effect is it's getting everybody who reads about it or thinks about it to think more about the spirit and think about what they're buying. And because it's been for so long, as many critics and adherents have rightly pointed out, it just is blank information. It's not available on a label. It might not be on a website. It's sometimes very hard to come by. How was this rum made? There's nothing describing it. I love that we're seeing this new era of labels that are just look like, lab
textbook. Yeah.
Lab sample. It's just a grid. The back label of Blacktop 50th anniversary is comedy gold. You're just like, I love this. 0.2814% of this blend. I'm like, look, this is great. So people, I know certainly my club members love it too. They love looking at a Habitation Bellier bottle and saying, isn't this great? Now I know, look how detailed it's what's the art on the bottle? The art is a picture of the still.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love seeing like almost the challenge some brands have now in presenting information like that simply. And actually I was just scrolling through Reddit, and I followed the Mezcal subreddit community, and someone was pointing out that Mezcal Vago recently redid their labels. And we actually had someone who's on the Vago team on the podcast, because he also is a part of the team behind
Paranubis.
Yes, thank you. The name was escaping me. And I've always thought those Vago labels do such a beautiful job at presenting those production details in a simple way that's beautiful. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
I love the Paranubis website. It's so good.
Yes,
it is.
Just a photographic step-by-step of the whole process, and it's very satisfying. And I know it's like, you mean it's a cane juice rum made in Oaxaca? It's like it's almost coded to be bartender crack. Like they're going to be like, this is going to be the best thing I've ever had. Automatic. It ticks every craft bartender box, and rightly so. It's lovely stuff. And I just love, and I remember telling the club members, look at this website. How good is this? It's just perfect. It's a photo essay. This is exactly
it is. It's funny because we talk about the website during the interview. We interviewed Francisco Terrazas, and it was funny when I pulled up the website. It has that beautiful picture of the valley where it's made, and at the bottom underneath it, the photo credit was Francisco Terrazas, and I was like, dude, you took that photo. It's so good. But one more note about the categorization system. I'm sure people ask you about this all the time, but we were talking about just kind of like the constant evolution of varieties of new rums that are available now. In many places around the world, but in the U.S., like you were saying, it's really a great time to be a rum lover, and so much has changed, even between the time the book came out and now. If you were to ever, release a new edition of Smuggler's Cove, how much different do you think the specific rums listed in those categories would change from where it was, I guess, around 5 years ago now?
Wow. I mean, it would be so much longer. It'd be great. It would have even been longer then. I mean, there was definitely some editorial, like, this is too long.
We've only got so many pages. Yeah.
We got so many pages. I had already fought to get this thing so much more illustrated and longer than the publisher had wanted. So I was, I had to concede some places. But yeah, no, it would definitely be longer. Some of those don't exist anymore,
right?
Which is frustrating. Some of them, I don't know. There's probably a couple that I wouldn't list anymore. But most of them I would stand by. And the other frustration is that I get emails all the time from people in Europe, and they're like, "This is, your book's great, but we don't have this is all completely.
We don't have Hamilton over here."
Yeah, exactly. We don't have Hamilton, something like that. And I say, well, wow, you have so many cool things to do.
Yeah. Crimea River.
That's what I was thinking.
Exactly. Yeah. Poor you. But I would love to do it. I'd love to find some method to. I suppose I could. We have talked in the past about trying to do a current running list that we could post somewhere
online.
Yeah, and keep up to date. But
that would be super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that just gets kind of bumped down the project list.
It seems like, between, owning 4 or 5 bars somewhere around there, you might be kind of busy. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's especially with all of them basically reopening at the same time. So it's it's been a busy time, but yeah, no. So I mean, that is one of the obvious problems when you've got something static like a book, is that it even the lists in the back of best bar recommendations,
right?
Rum bars and things. That's obviously grown, and I'd love to be able to recommend more rum bars and things like that. So it's just it exists in some ways as a snapshot. If our publisher ever wants to do an updated, revised edition, then we'll do that. But there hasn't been any interest expressed, to my knowledge.
Oh, they need to get on that. Come on, I know the people want it out there. So come on, let's get on that, guys.
Yeah.
Martin, one of the things you had mentioned kind of in passing earlier when we were talking about the Smuggler's Cove bar was the rum collection. And I've heard it described as insanely large, and maybe even the biggest rum collection in the world.
Well, I think there's a few bigger outside of the United States, but I'm pretty sure we're on top of it in the United States. We had the good fortune, at least, to deplete a lot during COVID. We've sold through some bottles and things like that, so it was helping. It was a lifeline for us. But now we're sort of at the broke but rebuilding phase as we come back in. So we're reordering, reactivating, lots of new stuff coming on board.
Yeah,
we are on track within the next couple of weeks to break 1,000 in stock. So. And it's not, I mean, it could be 1,500 if I just didn't care about the rum. I mean, it could be bigger, but there's just a lot we don't carry. And, for example, there's a lot of really perfectly lovely, lightly aged, either all column or, white, he said, in giant air quotes that nobody
He's doing the air quotes, everyone listening. Yeah.
Doing massive air quotes, everybody. I don't like that word. But there's so many that are perfectly good, but I just, either they're not designed to drink neat in the first place, or just there wouldn't be any necessary guest interest in them. And that's fine. We have plenty to choose from. It's not a big deal. There's lots and lots of,
I'd say so. 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's stuff like that. I don't really carry any, I only carry, I think at this point, 3 spiced rums. I have to have actually seen physical spices floating in the If I haven't seen them, then I don't carry it. And there's lots of craft distillers who are doing spiced rum with real physical spice.
For sure. Yeah.
So that's out there for sure. But I'm not interested in extracts and things like that. So I don't really do any of that, those brands, or just artificial flavors or whatnot. So those things are missing. We decided to do just kind of a hold on cachaça. We really only have a handful of brands of cachaça because not absolutely nothing against cachaça, but I just thought this could spiral and it's kind of hard to, keep the focus. So I don't
Could have constraints somewhere.
Got a constraint somewhere. So I have very few cachaças. I'm having a lot more fun finding things like Paranubis now. I like finding fresh cane juice rums from other places too, because I feel like that's giving me, I'd rather have a bunch of fresh cane juice rums from other countries to spread that message around more than
absolutely
to have a massive selection of Brazilian. So so that's been great. We've done a lot of our own bottlings, of course, too. We've had a lot of private labels, individual still selections that I've done. The first Chairman's Reserve Masters selection was for Smuggler's Cove. And,
we thank you for that because John and I are big fans of the Master Selection series and
I'm really
St.
glad
Lucia Distillers.
Yeah,
I'm really glad that they decided to expand that into a fun annual series with really cool variety. And so now it's, and one of the big exciting things for us out here in California is that we are on the cusp, he said optimistically. Has to get through our California State Assembly, but we're on the cusp of making full bottle sales for bars permanent.
Fingers crossed.
State. Oh yeah, and that's going to change the game. I know it's been big in Kentucky and things, and to be able to sell whole bottles, we'll be able to do a lot more really interesting selections and private bottlings and things. I mean, one of the problems of getting something like a 250 bottle series of rums that are really expensive and lovely and luxuriant is I can't mix with them. The port comes out. So if I can't sell the whole bottles, which is why we've done a lot of these in partnership with
stores,
friends. Yeah. So we'll be looking to do more of that if this comes through. Because I remember I had this big dream on opening. During pre-opening, I convinced Demerara Distillers to bottle me a private label. And so I got, we opened and I got delivered. I got 500 12-liter cases of this private label. And then suddenly I hadn't really thought it all through. Like, where am I going to put this?
Right.
So I was at least able to convince the distributor to hang on to them and let me take them one by time. But what they wouldn't do, unfortunately, is give me any kind of payment terms. So I had to suddenly come up with a 6-figure invoice right after opening. So I had to actually take another loan out.
Wow.
Here.
Guys like a big 18-wheeler here. Sign for this. Cash on delivery.
Wait a minute. You want do what? 21 days? You want it? It's payable. What? Yeah, it was. That was.
What were the specs on that rum from DDL?
So I created a blend. It's still secret of largely existing products in their portfolio and things like that. And the whole thing was the idea was to have something that would be really affordable by buying in volume, but really great, featured all their signature marks in it, not all of them, but it had a lot of PM in it. It had a lot of EHP in it. It was, and I did it in 1 liter bottles, really simple, screw caps, no corks, just a tall bar bottle. And then I actually ended up designing the label myself. I had to do all the government approval for the label. The whole thing.
That was fun working with the TTB. I hear that's really fun.
Yeah, this was my first time out and I didn't know I got this, giant instruction manual of how to do it. And then I also, in order to save money, I made the label black and white. I made it one-sided. So I put the barcode and the government warning on the front, front label. So it was all designed to how can I make this as affordable as possible? And it was great, and I love the rum, and I miss it. But it was we've moved on to other things. Things have evolved, and products have changed and stuff. So it's
sure.
But it was fun. We opened with that. We had a private label California fresh cane juice rum from St. George Spirits.
St. George, yeah.
That was one of their earliest experiments, and I said I will take a barrel off of you, and we had this really wonderful, funky pot distilled cane juice rum from cane fields that are no longer growing because we don't really have a lot of water anymore in California. But it was. So we've done it really for day one for 11 years. We've been doing private bottlings, and now my mission is I'm collecting trying to collect all of my favorite stills, and that's kind of That was the impetus behind the first St. Lucia Distillers Master Selection. I just said, I just want John Doerr #1 by itself. That's all I want. I don't want it to be old, especially 5, 6, whatever. It ended up being 7 years old when we bottled it. I just want it because I didn't want it to be over oaked. I wanted it to be expressive of that still. And I just did it unfiltered, cast strength, nothing. And they were down there writing, what kind of filtration? No. What proof do you want it at? Yes. What do you want? I said, I want you to knock the bung off the top of the barrel and rotate it over and hold the bottles underneath it. That's all I want you to do. But yeah, we did that. I love this. I love the traditional column at English Harbor. So we did a cast strength bottling from English Harbor just for the Cove. So I'm sort of on a mission to keep doing this. It's a lot of fun. And hopefully this log is passed. I'll be able to keep it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Are there any other stills on your list that you haven't checked off yet that you feel like sharing, or is that going to be kind of a surprise?
There are several, but I don't feel like sharing.
Totally fair. Totally fair.
So, Martin, I saw an interview you did a couple years back, and you kind of painstakingly took the time to explain that you don't consider yourself a bartender, which, after reading Smuggler's Cove and the amount of knowledge packed into it and the amount of knowledge you've expressed here even today, I didn't kind of expect that. I was left to maybe presume you were making a distinction between the skill set of maybe a mixologist and a bartender, maybe. But if not, I was hoping you could expand on that a bit and tell us a little bit about the difference between what you do and how you do it and the bartender.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Bartending is a fantastic skill that I am very bad at. Simple as that. I mean, bartending requires so much. I mean, I love the old expression is great. Mixologist serves drinks, bartender serves people. And not only is it a question of that, is it about that service, about that guest interaction, about that friendship? Because yes, it's not that I'm not mean to guests or something, but it's more than that. It's a sense of kind of taking the whole room in at once, seeing where everybody is. It's that sense that you're shaking the drink with one hand, you're stirring with the other, and just out of the corner of your right eye, you can just see that the guest at bar 2 just took the last sip of their drink. So when these two are served, you're going to go right to that person and say, hey, what can I get you next? It's that ability to multitask, to work a bar, it's a really incredible skill and hard to master. And frankly, in our industry, it's a shame because we lose some of the best all the time to brand work. But there's a real skill set that I am just not good at. I mean, I can make you a fantastic drink, but it'll probably take a long time, and it'll probably might be at the to the dismay of other people at the bar. I'm not taking care of as quickly as I'd like to. So I say that specifically to go out of my way to tip my hat to bartenders and to tip my hat to their skills and their credit. To me, I feel like I am more of a multi-purpose sort of customer service, sales, idea, vision, all these different elements, and actually increasingly things like good at snaking toilets, good at mopping up puke, those kind of things.
Getting ponds to work again.
Yeah, I sure wish I could do that. That's an extra specialized skill set.
Right.
Pond maintenance. I did used to get in there all the time and clean it myself, and it was, you really see some terrible things. It's my oft-repeated sound advice: don't put a water feature in a bar that guests can get at.
Ooh, hadn't thought about that. Yeah,
it's not.
Imagination is going some weird places now.
Yeah, you don't want to go there with it. So we don't. So no, I think it's. Yeah, I definitely. It's. I say that out of huge deference and respect to bartenders.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, one of the things I loved, reading the more kind of cocktail-focused parts of the book, the tradition of secrets in tiki and exotic cocktail making. And, there's only one recipe in the whole Smuggler's Cove book that, you have Mark kind of covered up some of the secret ingredients of the Smuggler's Cove rum barrel. And I came across a thread the other day where some people were trying to decode the ingredients. And I'm not going to get into asking what's in it or anything like that. But someone in the comments, I was wondering, how do you safeguard secret recipes and things like that at Smugglers? And someone left a comment saying that, and this might be completely untrue, but they mentioned that you and Rebecca still make the Smuggler's Cove rum barrel kind of blend that goes into it at your house. Is that true, or does someone make that up?
No, it's 100% true. We've never.
I love that.
It's the only ingredients that are it's the only item that is, it's the only one that's a secret. It's just an homage to what Don had done, how Don was basically doing it to dissuade other bar owners from poaching his staff. That it was kind of fun, but it was more than that. I mean, that was a big part of it, but part of it was that mystique that you walked into a Don the Beachcomber and it just, I mean, if you see the original mention, here's the drink. It's called Shark's Tooth. There's an illustration of the drink. There's a jaw, shark's jaw, bone jaw. That's it. That's all it says.
That's the ingredient list.
There's not a single ingredient listed on his menu. And it was all made in the back. And that was part of the excitement. That was the adventure of this experience. I'm going to sit down. This sounds interesting. This sounds dangerous. This sounds unusual. What's this? It's called this is called the Navy grog. Ooh, I guess that might be kind of hearty tasting, or I don't know, whatever it was. You took a chance. You took, it was a time when you would say, yeah, that sounds great. You just took it. And it's still like this, plenty of places, certainly like this at the Tiki Tea still. And this thing would arrive in front of you, frosty, cold, mysterious. You'd have to kind of try to piece together as you drank it. I just thought that was fun. Now, I think that day is kind of over. People love seeing drinks being made in front of them. They like seeing the effort, the process. They like that. Obviously these days it's not really, you can't really get away with just saying we're not going to tell you what's in it. There's lots of allergens and things like that we're all concerned about. So you can't really do that anymore, but we just wanted to have one as an homage. And so, yeah, absolutely. It contains ingredients that aren't used in any other drink at Smuggler's Cove. So there's no overlap. No one ever, there's some ingredients in it that aren't in anything else. So it doesn't, it's easy. And we just bring it in this big batches and we put it in squeezy bottles, and I would say the bartenders probably lost interest in figuring out what it was about 10 years ago. They just sort of shrug and make it, whatever, it's a secret, we don't know. So, but yeah, I think it's fun that some people try to hack it and things like that, but you won't.
So it's just like a weekly ritual at home.
It's whenever it's needed. It hasn't been in a year, but we batch it up and bring it in a big food safe container and call it a day. Yeah.
Love it. Sunday nights at the Cate residence.
We still make our hibiscus liqueur at home as well, but it's published. It's not a secret. But yeah, that's still our little fun, and it's good. And it had actually helped make the Smuggler's Rum Barrel a really popular to-go drink during lockdown. So
yeah, I bet that's really cool. I'm glad something I read on the internet turned out to be true. Not always the case. So
that's one.
Exactly.
So Martin, you've talked in the past about how rum has trouble conveying its own value in comparison to other spirits. And I think we covered a little bit of the reason why, some of that today, but I was more interested in asking you, do you think at this point in 2021, despite COVID, do you think we've made up any ground at this point and that the landscape is changing, or are we still just treading water here? And where are you at with that?
Oh, not at all. There's definitely there's been a tremendous amount of progress in conveying value. I think we're miles ahead of when I started looking into this stuff in the late 90s. I mean, it's night and day. I mean, I remember how Ed Hamilton, when he and I first met in probably 04, 05, and he was just starting to bring in Nissan and La Favorite. And so I remember that because of the constraints, because of what was traditional in Martinique, that there was, that it was 1 liter bottles. That it was much more common to see a 1 liter. And it was almost, the 750s weren't down there. It was maybe you found 700s, of course, but mostly everything was in a liter. So he thought, well, I'm going to just bring it in liters. And, there's no sense in trying to bring empty 750s to Martinique. But he had a problem because, of course, they were liter bottles and they ended up costing a lot more than most consumers were used to. Most rums on a shelf were in 750s in an American retail store. And so his were, and they were kind of jaw-dropping expensive. Not at the time, jaw-dropping. Right. But now, obviously you look at a bottle of Nissan and you think, well, the value of this bottle, the producers, I mean, obviously, okay, not all Americans, but your listeners to your podcast know that this is a superb rum from a superb producer, and consumers are smart enough to read the 1L at the bottom of the bottle now and see, that might be why it costs a little bit more. Mm-hmm. There was things like that I remember as being an issue, but I think the overall is just the breaking of that sort of $11.95 barrier into the notion that it's now very commonplace. I mean, I remember, I think Mount Gay had come in with I think 1703 struggled when it first came out to establish traction, for example. But now look at this great selection of, Trudy Branker's new, port cask and all these things that are coming out, the pot still releases, the peat smoke expressions, all these great Mount Gays that are all sitting in that sort of $50 to $150 range. Can't keep them on the shelves. So this is good. I mean, I think it's the change is happening. So no, tons of progress. Now, that's not to say we don't always take, a couple steps back every year. There's always some new products that come out every year where I just think, come on, we've come so far. Things were going so well. I mean, 10 years ago, more even, 15 years ago, I would say our problem is that when you walk into the Scotch aisle, into the single malt Scotch area of the liquor store, there is no pineapple Scotch. There is no coconut Scotch. There is no bubblegum Scotch.
Right.
There is sour wild cherry Scotch. That's part of the
dragon fruit Scotch.
Yeah, exactly. Dragon fruit. I don't know what brand are you referring to, sir? There's no perception that single malt Scotch, and that's what, that was obviously a huge part of, what Richard would campaign about. And so we've kind of watched this come and go in ebbs and flows. There's been a lot of brands where, brands who do offer that full spectrum, that have these luxury high-end products and that also have these kind of artificially flavored mixers. They've got this balancing act that they have to play. They have to juggle this marketing message, and not maybe always successfully in my mind, but they have to juggle this message. And that's why I remember when sort of Mount Gay stopped doing flavors, it was just easier. It's like, this is just going to be a lot easier for us to stop trying to sell all these flavors. We can just get on with it. Sure, there's no question there's still transparency issues. There's still, but they're vastly improved from where they used to be. And I think a lot of folks coming into rum now, who are critical but relatively new to the category, it used to be a lot.
You've got it good, Sonny.
Yeah, no, it is really. Yeah, no, not to be the old guy shaking fist at the sky. Yeah, that's definitely the. I feel like there's, for the every step. I mean, some years I'd say there's 2 steps back, 1 step forward, but most years I'd say there's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Yeah. And I do think that I like to see rum continue to focus on conveying its value, conveying the quality, conveying the effort of everybody throughout the chain involved in producing great rum, and just trying to lure more people over from other categories. I like to see rum trying to attract people out of Scotch, attract people out of bourbon, rather than just sort of trying to cannibalize the same piece of pie by fighting for the same other rum drinker. I think it's more important to attract the drinker of other spirits. And those people are ready to discover. I mean, I do it all the time, every day for 11 years. I people coming out of bourbon, people coming out of Scotch. Almost nobody who's come into my bar in 11 years, save a handful of existing junkies, and this is pretty recent, has, more than a handful of brands off the tip of their tongue. There's a couple of well-knowns, there's a couple of big ones, but most people aren't walking in and saying, I say, well, what do you like to drink? And they say, oh, well, I've, long been a fan of the I don't know, of the Habitation Velier range or something like that. I mean, that's new. I mean, but most people aren't going to come in with a bunch of favorites the way that I think is way more common in Scotch, in tequila, even in Irish whiskey. I mean, so there's such a big market out there. And so growth is, I do read, I stay on top of that information. Growth is slow in rum, always is. There's typically some years are negative. But even when you see a negative growth in rum one year, when you parse the category and you see, that it was being dragged down by the bottom shelf stuff,
right,
falling. But meanwhile, this much smaller volume, but much more premium, super premium selections are growing. And so there is a lot of promise here. So it's about keeping these things accessible and in volume, but without sacrificing character. So more brands releasing great characterful products. I mean, obviously, Appleton, for example, has always released high quality stuff at great price points. Certainly everything that, Foursquare is sending through to Total Wine is making sure that there's really excellent quality rum at very low prices.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, it's still, the entry point is still not onerous. I mean, in a way that other spirits are. I mean, it's getting tougher, sure. And rightfully so, it deserves to be worth more, but it's still a way to, there's still lots of terrific ways into this category that you'll just love. I still drink. I'm standing behind the bar last night. People are talking. I'll just reach into my well and drink some every day, drink an Appleton or something and just say, I know it's around all the time and it's everywhere, but it's great.
It's good.
Yeah. Appleton's the signature to 8 to 12 is still so great. Even I don't think I'll ever, grow tired of those or be above them in any way. So great point. Well, Martin, you've been generous with your time. You've hung out with us here for over an hour. You're a very busy person. You have bars to reopen, so we really appreciate it.
I'm into one right now. Leaping from this call.
So before we go, we have one tradition here on the Rumcast. It's an optional segment that you may choose to participate in or decline, but it is a rapid fire question segment where I put 60 seconds on the clock and John goes through some quick questions in succession. And are you up for it?
I'm up for it, but I may email you declining it later.
That's the beauty. That's the beauty of not doing this live.
That's great. I saw Martin adjusting his posture here. He was getting ready. He was like, all right, loosen up here.
Yeah.
Let's get going.
Stretch a little bit, get the game face on.
Have a rum. God. All right.
I just assumed, I saw you taking sips of some clear liquid, and I just assumed it was DOK because you kept bringing up DOK. So. As
you do, just sitting around drinking 6 minutes.
We would have been able to smell it through the Zoom call.
All right, go ahead.
All right, John, are you ready?
Ready.
All right, I've got 60 seconds and go.
All right, neat or on the rocks?
Neat.
Column, pot, or blend?
Decline to state.
Aged or unaged?
Decline to state.
Molasses or cane juice?
Oh, definitely taking the fourth.
3 for 3.
For fictional smugglers, do you prefer Han Solo or Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly?
Oh my God, Solo, for sure.
Okay. We know you've traveled a lot and are part owner in great bars across the U.S., as we talked about. Have you ever visited an American city and been like, oh my God, this city needs a Martin Cate rum bar immediately? If so, which one?
Grand Rapids, and it's there.
All right, yes.
Texas.
Yes. Don Beach or Trader Vic?
Steve Crane.
Nice.
Ooh, nice.
Is there a long-lost prequel to the Smuggler's Cove book that will only be released posthumously?
Yeah, Martin Cate, My Life in Vodka.
Which are you more proud of, Smuggler's Cove the bar or Smuggler's Cove the book?
Oh my God, definitely declined to state. No, that's not true. The bar.
Okay. Your wife might be mad at you for that one. I'm just saying.
She's part of the bar too.
All right. Don Beach's real name was Ernest Gant. As far as we know, your real name is Martin Cate, but if you were to create a tiki alias, do you know what it would be?
That's a great question. Back in the old days of Tiki Central, I was just Martiki. It was close enough.
There we go.
Right.
And that's time.
All right. Thanks so much, Martin. That was fun. Well declined for some of those. We understand that we put you on the spot there.
Remember that I am a retailer. I have lots of friends and lots of different brands.
We understand the value of diplomacy here, so it's all good. No, seriously, Martin, thank you so much. This was a blast. And for everyone listening, if for some reason you don't already have a copy of Smuggler's Cove, go get it. If you are in the San Francisco area, go visit them after the reopening. And if you're in Chicago, Portland, San Diego, Grand Rapids, go visit all the other bars. They're great. We'll mention specifically what those are when we record the intro. But thank you again so much. And enjoy the reopening. Have a blast.
Thank you, Will and John. Much appreciated. Good times.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. If you want to learn more about Smuggler's Cove, you can go to their website at smugglerscovesf.com. We'll also put links to that in the show notes and, to some other Smuggler's Cove related stuff, so you can check that out. Would highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the book if you don't have it yet. And remember, if you are close in the area around San Francisco, reopening June 15th, so go in person and check it out, have a cocktail, enjoy it. And last but not least, after you do that, if you haven't already, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave a review for the Rumcast. We love to see your feedback on the show, and when you do that, it helps other people find the podcast, which is always nice for us. And if you want to reach out, if you have ideas for future episodes or you have questions you want us to address on the show, email is a great way to reach us. We're at host@rumcast.com. That's host@rumcast.com. And John, I believe we're on some of those social media platforms out there that exist that I've heard so much about. Where are we? Where can people find us out there?
We are all over the internet, Will. We are Facebook and we are at Instagram, and you can find us there at the Rumcast on either site. And we are always happy to engage in conversation and talk about some of our episodes. If there's feedback, you can always leave comments there. And I thought it was cool that we started with talking about the Smuggler's Cove as one of the best rum-focused bars out there in the world. And we'd love to maybe think about talking to more people from different rum-focused bars from around the world as part of a series. So let us know maybe, what are some of those other rum bars or meccas for rum geeks like us that we should be talking about? Where do we go next? So hit us up on those social channels or email and let us know what your thoughts are.
Absolutely. All right, John. Well, until next time, I'll see you then.
All right.